So hello, my name is James Powell. I'm a graduate student project administrator for the Irene and Doug Schmeiser Center for Faith, Reason, Peace, and Justice. And we will host uh, Tevfik Karatop and a journey into exile on February 7th at STM College. Thank you very much for joining me, Tevfik.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you for having me.
So I was just wondering if you could give us a brief introduction and description to A Journey into Exile.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, A Journey into Exile is a JRS Canada offering. So, like starting in 2016, there was an idea about developing something like the blanket exercise of the Kairos Canada. So I hope you've seen it, you participated in a blanket exercise. So our director Norbert Pichet, he participated in one of the activities, and then he thought maybe we can develop something similar about the refugees and somehow communicate our cause about refugees. And in 2017 we had someone like an intern here, and she was very eager to work on this project, and it started like that. So they came up with the first edition, and during the last 5 years, so they revised the simulation exercise a couple of times. And when the pandemic hit, everything is online now. What are we gonna do? We cannot meet with people in person. And then they developed an online version. And now we are offering both online and in-person versions in English and in French. So we are based in Montreal, so everything is bilingual. So, and we have reached hundreds of people each year, so in Canada, in the United States. So, and the main idea in a couple of sentences, so this is a simulation exercise, but it's like a role-playing game, quote unquote game. So in the in-person version, and hopefully we will be facilitating an in-person version at the St. Thomas More College. So there are 42 refugee characters. So each participant has a refugee character and has a biography. So this is new actually in our revised version. So everyone gets a refugee character. And now, for instance, Tevfik is Muhammad from Syria, and he has 3 kids, and etc. etc. So, and during the exercise, everyone should make decisions similar to those made by refugees every day. So, and during the exercise, while we are somehow facilitating these discussions and decision making, we also share real refugee stories. So that is the somehow the beauty and the power of the simulation exercise. All of these refugee characters and the testimonies, stories of refugees we share, they are based on real refugee stories. So Jesuit Refugee Service here in Canada, we've been sponsoring refugees and resettle them in Canada for decades. So, and we work with refugees, and we would like to share their stories while people understand why they end up as refugees or why people are forced to flee their home. So during this exercise for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, so people learn about the root causes of refuge seeking. They learn about differences among different regions that are sending refugees to the West. And somehow we also want to garner hope for the future, because we've been working with those refugees for for a long time, and our somehow feeling, yes, people are suffering, and we definitely need to share their suffering, and everyone should know somehow the real stories of those people. But at the same time, these are resourceful people with agency, and we certainly believe we are we need to be hopeful, because these people are resistant, resilient people who come who first of all who take the decision of leaving their home, which is not an easy decision, and they arrive in a foreign country, and most of the time they cannot, but like some of them they can. And when they arrive, there is a long story. So, and we are also working on this part as well. So if you want, I can talk about like, we want to actually develop a subsequent, like exercise about like, somehow like journey in exile kind of idea. So, but like briefly, this is our simulation exercise.
And I agree that it's important to share the successes because oftentimes what we experience in our media landscape is the challenges of resettling refugees and the failures, one could say, of resettling refugees. So it's important to also share the successes, to show instances where refugees have been welcomed into Canada, into Europe, and illustrate new possibilities for what it means to welcome refugees in our own country, in our own cities. So I agree with
Right.
you. That's a very important dimension.
Yes, thank you.
And what are some of the, what do you wish to convey with uh, with A Journey into Exile? You talked about the sharing of people's testimonies. If you could just speak to that a bit more.
Thank you for the question. So, somehow we want to tell our participant, stop, stop and listen to those stories. Because we generally talk about like, numbers all the time when it comes to like, refugee issues. We have 100 million displaced people in this world. And I think like communicating that number is important, but it means there are 100 million different people with unique stories. Yes, unfortunately, we cannot share all of them, but we want to somehow like share at least some of them with people. And we want them like, could you humbly listen to those people? Unfortunately, we live in a political social climate where people have very strong ideas, like on both sides, about refugees. But we want to make somehow their stories real and in our life. Somehow, like, stop, listen to those. And we want to create empathy, of course. So, like, empathize with them because unfortunately, like, it's not easy to be a refugee. It's not an easy decision to leave your home. But at the same time, it doesn't stop there for us. Somehow it's not like, okay, I participated, so I'm so sad, that's good, so I'll go back home. Yes, of course we will go back home, but what am I gonna do? What is the action part of that feeling? Otherwise, there is no point in feeling, honestly, like this is my personal somehow like, opinion. There is no need to feel like pity or like, oh, I'm so sorry for them, or even like, feeling hopeful. If you don't translate those emotions into action, I think there is no point in like even participating. So this is somehow like, I would say our objective. Stop, listen to those stories and discern. Like, we are Jesuits and like we always somehow like, underline the importance of that discernment part and discern what is your calling to do with refugees, for refugees. And yes, change like, opinions, ideas with like, real information. So, and real stories, but at the same time, I think we all have like, responsibility for those people coming to our country or trying to come to our country, especially within this political climate. Somehow like, yeah, I think this is the main objective.
Yeah, I agree that it's very easy to use the label refugee as a substitute for person, human, that the people who want to come into our country due to a variety of reasons that have forced them out of their home country, that it turns them not into a human or a person, but into a category of refugee. So I
Yes.
agree with sharing, putting a face to that, can allow for a more empathetic interaction.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So just to maybe wrap this up, so following your presentation, if people are, as you say, moved to action, moved to do something to address the refugee situation abroad or in Canada, what would they be able to do? I think that often it can feel very overwhelming for the average person. What are some steps that they can do to make some sort of an impact or participate in welcoming refugees?
Thank you so much for asking. Like, honestly, this is the most like, popular, I will say, question I get after each session. And it's not an easy question, and there is no straightforward answer, like to that question. And like, we recently, like we have another project. We are working on a guidebook. So, and we would like to address this question within our guidebook. So, I mean, there is no one size fits all kind of answer for sure. But first of all, like, as I mentioned, like, please revisit your ideas about refugees. And as you said, like, that box, refugee identity box, comes with like, too many things, too many discourses, too many ideas about these people. And could you just revisit them? First of all, I think this is a great action item. So, and then, like we are in Canada, and there are different ways of being with those refugees. We call it like this culture of encounter. So this is what we are trying to do actually. Like, it's not me encountering you, so I'm just facilitating it, but I want you to encounter with refugees, and please continue to do so. I mean, like, there are like, thousands of asylum seekers in this country. There are like, thousands of refugees arriving in this country each year, and demand change. This is not like, I am the savior, I'll save everything. I mean, it's not the case. There is like the personal responsibility dimension, but structural change is essential. So demand. If you feel to be an activist, please. I mean, if you feel to write a letter to your MP, please. If you feel you just want to go and serve these people in silence, please to do so. And even in your conversations, whenever you talk about these people, please, please, please remember these are real people. They are not just numbers. And let's say you have a company. When you are hiring someone, oh, okay, asylum seeker, I'm not so sure. Please change that. Or, like in your community, in your neighborhood, in your church, synagogue, mosque, when you encounter with these people, please embrace them. And as I've said, like, stop and listen to them. And I met a lot of people who were willing to accompany them. So, and without falling into like a big trope, like, I'm here, I'm so lucky, I'm Canadian, I'm helping you, so you are in need. Yes, we are blessed with many resources in Canada, but I think like, we are not the hosts and they are the guests. Actually, we are all guests here. And when you think about like the history of Canada, actually, we are all like guests of our like, First Nations, to be honest. So I think like, being humble and somehow like, finding that equal ground and living within this like, culture of encounter. And then I think like, you will find your way. So it's gonna look like very different. Like for me, like, I professionally work on this subject. For some people, it might be like, different. So depending on your circumstances. But I would like to somehow add something. We never want people to start with this shame or guilt feelings. Like, unfortunately, this is very common. So like, I'm blessed with these things. I was born in Canada. So, and I'm feeling guilty now, like, I should build up on this guilt and help people. I don't think this is a good start, but you can start with this, like, common hope. that we are all the same. So, and we are called to accompany each other in different ways. So, and then I think if you build up on this idea, it will, like, you will find your way.
Yeah, when I spent a year with Romero House in Toronto, which is a organization, an intentional community that welcomes refugees, refugee claimants to Toronto. And very often it was simple actions of individual people who were willing to encounter, as you say, refugees, that made all the difference in welcoming them into Canada. There's so many hurdles that people who are called refugees have to overcome, work permits, finding housing, finding jobs, and sometimes it takes one person who's willing to go a little bit further to put up with some of the bureaucratic red tape that accompanies refugee claimants in this country, that can mean all the difference between having a refugee that is welcomed or rejected by our communities.
Right. Yes. So, and somehow, like, in my experience, when we realize we are very similar to each other in very boring ways, sometimes, like, we are all human beings, have, like, very similar anxieties, fears, like hopes. So all these, like, human things, then everything is easier, because then we don't build up on those, like, fears about refugees, like, crossing the border and invading my country, all those, like, discourses and opinions. So they are very unfortunate. And when we realize, when we have this encounter, real encounter with real people, I think everything is easier.
I agree. Okay, well, thank you very much, Tevfik, for joining us. Again, A Journey into Exile will come to STM, St. Thomas More College, on February 7th. You can register at Schmeiser Center. And yeah, thank you so much again for having us. We're excited to have you, and we hope for a good encounter. Thank you again, Tevfik.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time, and we are looking forward to it. So, especially February, Saskatoon, we are looking forward to it. Yes.
Hopefully the weather will stay nice and warm for you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, James.